Welcome to episode 1 of the Hunger series. In the first episode, we're going to be covering what is hunger, or more accurately, what is food insecurity. So according to the USDA, food insecurity is defined as the lack of consistent access to enough food for an active and healthy lifestyle. But we know that this definition can be pretty broad, so to better understand food insecurity, we can look and see how it affects 3 different individuals in 3 different scenarios. So let's look at the first scenario. Carlos works a minimum wage job in rural Minnesota. He lives alone and has 2 options for getting his groceries. First is a high quality grocery store that's around 30 miles away, and then there's also a convenience mart which is just a 5-minute walk. With these 2 options, Carlos can't afford to drive all the way to the supermarket and get food where there's fresh produce and a bunch of nutritious foods. So he must resort to his local convenience mart, which is more accessible for him, and he can only get goods such as canned goods and boxed goods. So in summary, Carlos has the means to get food. However, he doesn't have the access to getting nutritious foods. Let's look at our second scenario now. Olivia is a single mom with 2 children. She has recently become unemployed, and her unemployment benefits aren't enough to support her entire family. And as a result, she's unable to provide consistent meals for herself and her children, and so has to apply to a program called SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is what replaced food stamps a few years back. So here, Olivia doesn't have a job and isn't able to provide for herself nor her 2 children, and has to resort to food shelves and food stamps in order to put food on the table. However, these foods aren't necessarily always going to be nutritious, as she's subject to whatever the program or whatever the food shelves can provide for her. For our third and final scenario, we have Khalid and his family of 6. They've recently immigrated to the United States from Lebanon, and Khalid found an entry-level job working at a local gas station. Although he does make money, it isn't enough to support his entire family, and therefore he has to also apply to the SNAP program to ensure that his entire family has enough to eat. So in summary for Khalid, he does have a job, but he isn't able to provide enough food for his entire family, and this becomes a financial stressor. So now that we've gone through all 3 scenarios, what are some of the consequences that these individuals and families may face as a result of food insecurity? Let's go back to scenario 1. Carlos, the minimum wage worker, he may develop poor eating habits and has a higher potential of negative health consequences such as becoming overweight, developing high blood pressure, developing heart disease, type 2 diabetes, depression, and even being susceptible to some cancers. Carlos isn't able to maintain a nutritious lifestyle because he doesn't have access to those types of foods. Next, there's Olivia. Olivia's situation could create a lot of stress for her. She might have to prioritize her children's health over her own. And her children are at an age where their development is at a crucial point that requires proper nutrition. Olivia herself may go hungry while trying to provide for her children, or have to live on more canned and boxed goods as well, which may result in the same few problems that Carlos was also susceptible to. And in the third scenario, Khalid and his family rely substantially on the SNAP program. And the benefits that they receive don't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to obtain culturally specific foods, as their entire family immigrated from Lebanon. Without access to culturally specific foods, it may become more difficult for Khalid and his family to make use of the foods that they are given and to properly prepare them. Additionally, as a result of having to put a large amount of their funds towards necessities like food, Khalid and his family are put under a lot of financial stress where they may have to make trade-offs, such as not being able to go to the doctor for the entire year. Food insecurity is a big problem in the United States, and it's not just an overseas problem that people tend to think it is. The COVID-19 pandemic really unmasked the sheer size of the issue of food insecurity in the United States. It really raised the alarm for how many families that exist in the United States that live paycheck to paycheck. Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, About 10.5% of all US households experienced food insecurity at some point during the year. This is about 1 in 10. Now in 2020, nearly 1/4 of all households have experienced food insecurity. That's nearly 1 in every 4 individuals. The issue of food insecurity is quite complex, and it's a quite pressing one. We hope you learned something from our video in terms of what food insecurity is and why it's such a substantial problem. Stay tuned for our next video where we talk more about the issue of food insecurity in the United States.